I won the lottery, but my biggest mistake in my entire life was letting my family find out. At Thanksgiving, my sister discovered I had a little over $12 million sitting in one account, and the entire room went dead silent while she read the number out loud like it was a crime scene report. I was standing at the counter basting a turkey I'd paid a caterer to cook. When I heard my full name, sharp and high, from behind me, Sarah, what is $12.4 million? At first, I honestly thought she was reading some news headline. Then I saw my laptop in her hands, my banking app wide open, and that bright little push notification still glowing at the top of the screen. Do you know those family dynamics in which one child can do no wrong while the other appears to be invisible? Yes, welcome to my life in that moment. It felt like the invisible one had just been dragged into stadium lighting. My sister Rachel was frozen in the middle of my parents' station. Kitchen fingers hovering over the trackpad. Eyes huge, her voice shaking somewhere between disbelief and anger as she repeated the number 12,412,000. Are you kidding me? My mom's face went pale. First, she had a glass of wine in her hand, and I watched the color drain out of her cheeks like someone had pulled a plug. Then it rushed back all at once, and she went bright red, the way she used to when a teacher called about Rachel's behavior, not mine. My dad took off his glasses very slowly, like he needed to physically remove them to process what he was seeing. Then he squinted at the screen as if the extra zeros might disappear if he stared hard enough. My stomach just dropped. It was that sick roller coaster feeling, except you can't get off the ride. Every childhood fear I had about being the selfish one, the difficult one, the one who didn't understand family, came roaring back all at once. I actually heard my heartbeat over the football game in the living room and the clatter of dishes. It was like the whole house had tunneled down to that one glowing number on my screen. Rachel swung the laptop around so everyone could see it. You let me struggle while you sat on this. She snapped the word this like it tasted bad. She wasn't wrong about the struggling part. She'd been bouncing between degrees and apartments and dramatic emergencies for years, but the way she said it made it sound like I'd been hiding food during a famine instead of quietly working 12-hour days on a business no one bothered to ask about. Here's the bit that really messed me up. My mom didn't ask how I'd done it or if I was okay. Her first words were, "Sarah, why didn't you tell us? We could have used this for the family." Like the money had always been a shared savings account. I'd forgotten to mention my dad cleared his throat and said, "We've been drowning in bills, and you're just sitting on millions," as if my having savings was an act of betrayal. The real kicker came when Rachel added, "You know I have loans, you know I've been stressed out, and you just watched me panic about rent while you were a millionaire." She wasn't crying exactly, but her eyes were glassy, in that practiced way I remembered from childhood, the one that always got her out of trouble. Looking back, I can see how she'd already decided the moral of the story. Before I could say a word, I was the villain, the hoarder, the cold older sister who cared more about numbers on a screen than her fragile little sister's feelings. It's funny how life works out sometimes. I'd spent years being the background child, the one they forgot to pick up from practice, and suddenly I was the main event, not because of who I was, but because of what they thought they were owed. In one sentence, the entire conflict boiled down. To this, my family, who always treated Rachel as fragile and more deserving, had just discovered the invisible child was secretly wealthy and instantly acted like that money belonged to them by default. I tried to explain that the account they were staring at was business-related, that it wasn't just a giant personal piggy bank, but no one wanted to hear details. My mom was already talking about paying off their mortgage. My dad was muttering about setting things right. Rachel was listing her credit cards and student loans out loud like she was reading a shopping list. And every word carried this heavy implied accusation. "How dare you not give this to us?" Standing there with a greasy oven mitt still on my hand, I had this surreal thought. Am I actually the bad guy here for not handing over millions to the same people who spent decades acting like I was optional? Background noise. If you were in that kitchen, would you have pulled up a chair and written checks or closed the laptop and drawn a line? Because in that moment, with the turkey cooling and my family staring at me like an ATM with hurt feelings, I honestly didn't know which choice made me a monster and which one made me finally free. And that's kind of why I need to hit pause on the drama for just a second and talk directly to you. Because yes, this is a Reddit-style confession I'm reading and unpacking on this channel, but it's also my reality in a different costume, and these long, messy stories don't just appear out of thin air. I sit here for hours combing through posts like this, shaping them into something that actually feels like you're in that kitchen with the turkey getting cold and the bank balance glowing on the laptop. And honestly, do you know those family dynamics in which one child is the permanent villain and the other is the delicate angel who must be protected at all costs? Yes, welcome to my life and to this channel, because that's what we explore here over and over again. Here's the bit that really messed me up when I started doing these videos. They took off. The algorithm loved the chaos. People commented whole essays about their own families. And I thought, okay, maybe all the times I was treated like optional background noise, or at least turning into something useful, but lately it's been different. Views have been dipping. The algorithm is like that flaky cousin who only shows up when you win the lottery and ghosts you the second things get quiet. The real kicker came when I looked at my analytics after uploading a story that took me an entire weekend to script, record, and edit, and it just kind of sank without a ripple. Same kind of emotional weight, same kind of detail, but YouTube basically went cute and shoved it in a corner, and looking back I can see how without consistent likes, comments, and watch time, it's really hard to justify pouring this much time into each story. I'm not saying that in a dramatic, I'm quitting tomorrow way. I'm saying it in a very practical way, because these videos take research, rewriting, recording, fighting with audio levels, trying to make sure every beat lands, and if the platform isn't pushing them out, the only thing that actually keeps them alive is you interacting with them. So I'm going to ask you for something really simple and really low friction. Can you pause for 2 seconds, tap subscribe if you haven't already, like the video, and drop a comment telling me what you would do if a family member suddenly discovered you had $12 million sitting quietly in an account? Would you tell them everything, hide it forever, or do some chaotic third option I haven't even thought of? It might feel small on your end, but that stuff is literally the fuel that keeps this channel going. It tells the algorithm people care. It tells me I'm not just screaming into the void, and it builds this weird little corner of the internet where stories like this actually get heard. Instead of being buried under family is everything highlight reels, because here's the thing. It's funny how life works out sometimes. Not everyone has a safe place to say, my parents treated me like a walking wallet, or my sister acted like my bank balance was her birthright. Being told they're ungrateful by the same people who caused the damage by supporting this. You're not just helping me, you're giving people like the narrator a place to be judged fairly, and sometimes even validated when their own families would rather call them selfish than listen. So if you've ever been the invisible one, the scapegoat, the person who got asked for money before they got asked how they were doing, this is kind of your space too, and your engagement is what keeps it from disappearing into the algorithm void. All right, now that we've taken care of that, let's go back to where all of this really started, long before there was $12 million sitting on a screen, and long before Thanksgiving turned into a war zone. Because to understand why that laptop moment cut so deep, you have to see what my family was like when Rachel was still the miracle baby and I was already learning how to disappear. So let me back up and actually introduce myself the way I'd have to on Reddit. I'm using a throwaway because my family knows my main, and if they ever found this, it would be nuclear. I'm Sarah, 38F, older sister by 2 years, professional responsible one, part-time doormat in recovery. On paper, I'm the boring one. No kids, no dramatic divorces, no inspirational TikTok account. Just the older sister who is always, fine, yes, welcome to my life. I'm not here just to scream about money or flex a number on a screen. I'm here because I genuinely don't know if I finally went too far by saying no. This whole thing started as, am I the jerk for not bailing out my sister? But the more I tried to write it, the more it turned into, what do you do when your whole personality was built around being the background child and you suddenly stop playing the role? Do you know those family dynamics in which one kid becomes the project and the other becomes the easy one? The golden child gets all the attention, all the worry, all the parent-teacher conferences, while the easy kid gets, oh, thank God you're low maintenance, we just don't have the bandwidth for you right now. That was us. Rachel was the project. I was the bandwidth problem. At first, it didn't have a villain. Rachel was born premature, tiny and wired up in NICU pictures my mom still keeps in her wallet. She was the miracle baby who almost didn't make it. I was the sturdy toddler who did make it, so apparently that meant I could raise myself. Looking back, I can see how my parents were terrified and exhausted, but kid me just knew one thing. If Rachel sneezed, the world stopped. If I had a fever, I got dropped at grandma's so I wouldn't endanger her. Here's the bit that really messed me up. Being the healthy, easy one sounds like a compliment until you realize it's just code for we're not going to invest in you. The worst thing wasn't even the missed recitals or the forgotten birthdays. It was watching my parents clap like Rachel had discovered gravity because she got a C+ in algebra while my straight A's were treated like background noise. I'd bring home honor roll certificates, and my dad would literally say, "Thank God you're self-sufficient. We just don't have to worry about you." Cool. Love that for me. So I became the background character in my own family sitcom. I was the one doing dishes in the scene where everyone else is crying over Rachel's latest crisis. I cracked jokes about it, 'cause what else do you do? Don't worry about me. I'll just be over here solving my own emotional development. Wry humor is cheaper than therapy when you're 16, and it's funny how life works out sometimes. When you grow up learning that no one is coming to save you, you stop waiting. I began building this quiet, obsessive independence way before there was a dollar sign attached to it. I got used to handling my own problems, my own homework, my own rides, my own everything. No one was monitoring my failures or my successes, so I got to experiment, push, learn, and yes, get a little intense about never needing anyone. The real kicker came when that same intensity turned into my career. People keep assuming the $12 million was a lottery ticket, or crypto, or some wild lucky break. It wasn't. It was years of being the invisible kid who overprepared for everything because if I messed up, no one was going to swoop in. The money is just the grown-up version of that little girl packing her own overnight bag for grandma's just in case my sister needed the hospital again. So when you hear about my family seeing that $12.4 million number on my laptop and acting like I'd stolen it from them, you have to understand they helped create the person who built it, but they never actually saw her. To really get why I said no at Thanksgiving, you have to see how many times I said yes as a kid without anyone even noticing. And that starts with the first time I got sent away for having the audacity to catch a cold. That first time I got sent away for a cold only makes sense if you know what life felt like before everything went sideways, before hospitals and specialists and whispered conversations in hallways started running the show. At first, we were just normal, boring even. We had a small 3-bedroom house with beige carpet that never quite looked clean no matter how much my mom vacuumed. My dad worked a regular 9 to 5 at an insurance office, the kind of job where the wildest story was someone filling out the wrong form. My mom did part-time bookkeeping for a dentist and full-time damage control for 2 kids and a husband who forgot trash day every single week. We had this thing on Sunday mornings, pancakes, not Pinterest pancakes, lumpy batter, slightly burned edges, syrup that was definitely the store brand. Dad would flip them in his old Kiss the Cook apron that had a grease stain shaped vaguely like Florida, and Mom would yell from the hallway, "Don't let them eat before I find their shoes." We'd sit at the table in our pajamas, hair a mess, TV on low in the background. It wasn't magical. It was just safe. Do you know those family dynamics in which everything looks like a sitcom on the outside? We weren't that. We weren't the Brady Bunch. My parents bickered about money. My mom got snappy when she was tired. My dad had a short fuse in traffic. But honestly, back then, I never questioned if I was loved. I never wondered if Rachel and I were on the same level. We were just 2 kids sharing a room with mismatched twin beds and a poster of a dolphin we'd begged for at the mall. Some of my favorite memories are so small they almost feel fake when I say them out loud. My dad sitting with me at the kitchen table tapping his pen against a yellow legal pad, walking me through long division like it was some top-secret adult skill I was finally being trusted with. He'd draw little smiley faces next to the problems I got right and pretend it was an official grading system. I remember thinking, wow, I must be pretty smart if he's spending this much time with me. My mom was the loudest person at my third-grade field day. She wore this ridiculous wide-brimmed hat and yelled my name like I was competing at the Olympics instead of stumbling through a sack race. When I tripped and face-planted in front of everyone, she laughed first, then helped me up, then told me I was built for the brain events. Wry but loving. Looking back, I can see how that one line lodged itself somewhere deep in me. And then there was the fishing trip. My dad borrowed his friend's tiny boat, and we all went out on this murky little lake that probably had more soda cans than fish. Rachel and I forgot sunscreen, because of course we did, and we both ended up with matching red shoulders that hurt every time we moved. We spent the next 3 days walking around the house like robots, hissing dramatically every time a backpack strap touched our skin. My parents kept saying, "That's what you get for not listening," but they were smiling when they said it. It actually felt like a family joke, not a punishment. It's funny how life works out sometimes. Looking back, I can see how those tiny ordinary moments convinced me we were solid. We had arguments about chores. We had late notices on the fridge. We had nights where dinner was cereal. But I didn't lie awake wondering who mattered more. I suppose that's the thing I miss the most. The assumption that love in our house was evenly distributed, even if nothing else was. All of that was before the night with the blue hospital wristbands and the beeping machines. Before premature became the word everyone whispered like a curse and a miracle at the same time, before doctors started saying things like fragile and high risk, and my parents started looking at me like I was a walking petri dish. If you'd frozen my life right there, pancake sundaes, math homework at the kitchen table, shared sunburns and field day trophies made of plastic, you'd never guess that one of us would grow up believing we were disposable, and the other would be told the world owed her everything. You'd never guess which one I'd turn out to be, and you definitely wouldn't guess what happened the first time my mom decided my stuffy nose was more dangerous than any stranger in a waiting room. You'd never guess which one I'd turn out to be. And you definitely wouldn't guess what happened the first time my mom decided my stuffy nose was more dangerous than any stranger in a waiting room. It started with red numbers in the dark. 2:17 a.m., glowing on my alarm clock, right before my door flew open, and my mom's hands were on my shoulders shaking me hard enough that my teeth clicked. "Get up, now, shoes on." Her voice had that high, thin edge I'd only heard once before, when she burned her hand on the oven. I sat up dizzy, my nose clogged, hair stuck to my cheek. "What's wrong?" I croaked. She didn't answer. She just said, "Rachel can't breathe," and that sentence snapped my whole body awake. Do you know those family dynamics in which one child is suddenly made of glass and the other is made of rubber? Yes, welcome to my life. We barreled down the hallway and I could hear it before I saw it. This horrible wet, whistling sound, like someone trying to suck air through a straw full of glue. Rachel was propped up on pillows, eyes wide, lips tinged gray-blue, clutching her chest. Dad scooped her up, blanket and all, and we were in the car before my brain caught up. The car ride felt like a video on fast forward. Streetlights smearing into yellow streaks, the dashboard clock flipping numbers too quickly, my mom twisting around to keep a hand on Rachel's knee. I was wedged in the corner of the back seat, seatbelt cutting into my neck, trying not to cough because I'd already heard Mom hiss. "I told you she was getting sick, Jim. We can't have her around Rachel like this." Sirens wailed somewhere in the distance, not for us, but close enough that my heart sank to their rhythm. The ER doors whooshed open into this blast of cold air and antiseptic. That smell? It never really leaves your nose after the first time. They rushed Rachel into a bay with curtains that didn't quite close, and suddenly it was tubes and wires and plastic everywhere. Oxygen mask over her tiny face. Clear tubing snaking into her arm. The relentless beeping of monitors, high and shrill, like they were tattling on her lungs. I got parked in a sticky plastic chair in the corner, my feet not quite touching the floor, clutching my jacket because no one had told me where to put it. Nurses hovered over Rachel, adjusting dials, murmuring numbers. A doctor spoke in that calm but not really voice about complications and risk of respiratory failure, and will need to monitor her very closely. The words bounced off the white walls and landed in my stomach like rocks. Here's the bit that really messed me up. In that whole chaotic scene, not one person actually looked at me. Not the nurses, not the doctor, not even my parents, unless it was to say, "Sarah, be a big girl, okay? You need to stay calm." I was 8. I was literally shaking so hard the chair creaked. But sure, let me just tap into my inner Navy SEAL. My mom's entire body was angled toward the bed, fingers pressed into the rail like she could hold Rachel's lungs open by sheer will. I tried to make myself smaller. I tucked my feet under the chair, pressed my back against the wall, watched the green line on the monitor rise and fall in jagged little mountains. After a while, the room felt like it was shrinking, the curtain edges creeping closer, the beeping louder, the air thicker. I remember thinking, if I start crying, they'll be mad, because then they'll have 2 problems instead of 1. So I didn't. I just sat there, breathing shallow, like I was stealing oxygen from my sister. Looking back, I can see how that night rewired the whole house. When Rachel finally came home days later, she didn't just come home as my little sister. She came home as a medical project. The living room turned into a mini ICU. Air purifier humming in the corner, filters stacked like white bricks, pill organizers the size of tackle boxes lined up on the coffee table, a laminated schedule taped to the fridge with color-coded slots, meds, breathing treatments, specialist calls, and that faint bleach smell? It settled into the couch cushions and our curtains, like the hospital had followed us back and decided to stay. The worst thing wasn't the machines or the rules, it was the way our whole orbit shifted. Her health became the sun, and the rest of us were just satellites. Every decision ran through the same filter. Is this safe for Rachel? Who gets attention? The one whose oxygen stats used to drop. Who gets comfort? The one who had scared everyone half to death. Who gets scolded for sneezing in the wrong room? Guess who? The real kicker came when my stuffy nose turned into a permanent label. I wasn't Sarah with a cold. I was a risk. Playdates were canceled if I coughed. I got sent to grandma's at the first sign of a sniffle, like I was smuggling biohazards in my sinuses. It's funny how life works out sometimes, because those exiles to grandma's would eventually lead to my obsession with vintage jewelry and, much later, that little $12 million secret. But in that moment, all I knew was that there was this invisible glass wall in our house now. Rachel was on the inside, surrounded by monitors and soft voices. I was on the outside, pressing my hands against it, not even sure what I was asking for. And that glass wall didn't go away. It just got thicker every time my mom chose a monitor beep over my voice, every time a thermometer reading mattered more than my report card. By the time I was old enough to understand money, I'd already learned the first brutal lesson. In my family, crisis earns you gravity. Quiet competence just makes you easy to ignore. So I did what ignored kids do best. I began building a whole life where they wouldn't think to look. So while I was quietly building that invisible life, my parents were busy drafting what I now call the family biohazard protocol. It wasn't written down anywhere, obviously. But it was very clear. Any sniffle, any cough, any vague "I don't feel good" from me triggered one response: immediate exile. Destination: Grandma Marie's or Aunt Kelly's. Reason: for your sister's safety. Do you know those family dynamics in which one kid is basically treated like a walking germ cloud while the other is a porcelain doll? Yes, welcome to my life. The rule was simple, in this darkly comic, completely unfunny way. Rachel sneezed, warm blanket, humidifier, mom hovering with a thermometer. I sneezed? Car keys, overnight bag, and my mom calling my grandma like I was a contaminated package that needed rerouting. At first, it actually felt a little exciting. The first time I got sent away, I had a mild cold. We're talking 1 degree above normal, barely a sore throat. My mom pressed the thermometer, frowned like it was a failing report card, and said, "We can't risk it with Rachel. You'll go stay with Grandma for a few days, okay? It'll be fun." And honestly, it kind of was. Grandma Marie made me grilled cheese with the crust cut off, gave me extra dessert, and let me stay up late watching black and white movies. Then it escalated. Spring rolled around and my allergies showed up, like they do every single year. I'm sniffling from pollen, rubbing my eyes, and my dad is already dialing Aunt Kelly. "She's sounding congested again," he says. right in front of me like I'm a weather report. I tried to protest. It's just allergies. I'm not sick, but the decision was made. By dinner, I was on Aunt Kelly's couch. Rachel was protected, and my parents were doing what they had to do. The real kicker came when I sneezed twice, literally twice. We were in the living room. I'd just come home from school, and I did that double sneeze everyone does when dust hits your nose. My mom's head snapped around like she heard a fire alarm. "Are you getting sick?" she demanded. I said no, I just sneezed, but I could already see it in her eyes. 2 hours later, I had a small duffel bag and a ride to Grandma's. No fever, no cough, just 2 sneezes and a very fragile sister. After a while, it became so predictable that I started pre-packing. If my throat felt even the tiniest bit scratchy, I'd quietly put a few outfits, my toothbrush and my favorite book into a backpack and leave it by my bedroom door. Looking back, I can see how messed up that is, an 8-year-old doing emotional disaster prep like a tiny doomsday planner. But I knew the script. Symptom, panic, exile. Repeat. Here's the bit that really messed me up. At first, those trips felt like little vacations. Grandma Marie would slip me extra cookies and say, "Don't tell your mother." Aunt Kelly let me watch PG-130 movies and paint my nails dark colors my mom hated. For a while, I convinced myself I was lucky. Who else gets bonus sleepovers with the fun relatives just for sneezing? Then I started noticing the part no one talked about. No one was ever sad to see me go. My mom never looked torn, never hesitated at the door. My dad didn't say, "I'll miss you, kiddo," or ask if I wanted to stay. The energy was always this weird mix of urgency and relief, like shipping me off solved a problem and freed up space for what really mattered. Rachel. Kids aren't stupid. You pick up patterns way faster than adults think you do. After enough for your sister's safety trips, I realized the unspoken message. I was a walking biohazard near Rachel. My presence in my own home was conditional. I had to be perfectly healthy, perfectly low maintenance, perfectly quiet. Any deviation from that, and I was out. The worst thing is, the only people who seemed even slightly confused by this were the ones I was being sent to. Grandma Marie would gently ask, "Why are you here again, sweetheart? Is Rachel sick?" I'd say, "No, I am," and she'd frown in this soft, worried way that told me she didn't buy it. One night, when she thought I was asleep on the pull-out couch, I heard her on the phone saying, "She's not contagious, Linda. She just has allergies. This is getting ridiculous." Aunt Kelly was less subtle. One night, after my 3rd allergy exile in a month, she handed me a bowl of popcorn and just sighed. "It's like they forget they have 2 kids," she said. Then immediately winced, like the words had escaped by accident. But they landed. Hard. Because I'd been feeling that exact thing and didn't have the language for it yet. It's funny how life works out sometimes. Those exile trips, the ones that were supposed to keep Rachel safe from me, ended up being the only places where someone looked at me and thought, "This isn't normal." And once that thought is planted, you can't unsee it. You start questioning everything they call for your sister's safety, and you start wondering what else in your family is dressed up as love when it's really just convenience. Once you start seeing the convenience under all that so-called love, you can't unsee it, and it starts coloring everything, especially the big moments that are supposed to feel safe and solid. Do you know those family dynamics in which one kid could cure cancer and the other just has to remember their locker combination to get a parade? Yes, welcome to my life. The first time it really slapped me in the face was 5th grade, when I brought home a report card with straight A's. Not like mostly A's and a pity B in gym. I mean a perfect, teacher wrote a note about my potential kind of report card. I remember walking into the kitchen, clutching that paper like it was a golden ticket. At first, Mom was on the phone, pacing, whispery yelling. Her cough sounds tight. What if it's turning into something? Dad was flipping through the mail, half listening. I waited. I tried to time it for a pause in the crisis. When Mom finally hung up, I took a breath and said, "I got straight A's." She glanced at the paper, barely skimmed it, and said, "That's nice, honey, but we have to take Rachel in tomorrow. Louis is worried about that little wheeze." The worst thing was, there wasn't even an actual wheeze. Rachel had cleared her throat twice during dinner the night before. That was it. My perfect report card landed on the counter with the grocery coupons. And guess who got a full day of attention, stickers, and a lollipop at the pediatrician, just to be safe? Looking back, I can see how that moment taught me the formula. My achievements equals background noise, Rachel's symptoms equals breaking news. And it didn't stop at report cards. The real kicker came when the stakes felt bigger, when it wasn't just a piece of paper, it was me on a stage, 7th grade talent show. I had a solo, not a cute group number where you can hide behind jazz hands, an actual solo. I've been practicing for weeks, singing in the shower, in Grandma Marie's spare room during another exile, into a hairbrush like every cliché movie montage you've ever seen. Mom and Dad promised they'd both be there, front row. We wouldn't miss it for the world, Dad said, which is hilarious in retrospect because apparently the world includes Rachel's mildly stuffy nose. I remember standing in the wings, the auditorium buzzing, that weird mix of sweat, dust, and cheap perfume. My name was called. I walked out, lights hot on my face, heart going a million miles an hour. And I did what every kid does. I scanned the audience for my people. Row 3 center, where they said they'd sit? Empty. 2 perfectly vacant chairs, like someone had reserved them for the ghosts of involved parents. I kept scanning, because your brain tries to protect you. Maybe they're late. Maybe they're in the back. Maybe I just can't see. But no, just a sea of other people's moms and dads, holding up camcorders and phones, and this glaring little pocket of absence where mine were supposed to be. I sang anyway. I hit every note. I smiled at the judges. I did the whole thing. And the applause felt like it was for someone else's kid, because the only people I wanted to see clapping weren't even in the building. When I got home, the house smelled like chicken soup. Rachel was on the couch with a blanket, watching TV. Mom said, "Sweetie, I am so sorry. She spiked to 99.7. We couldn't risk it." 97. I've had higher temperatures from walking too fast. Fast forward a few years and watch how the universe magically rearranges itself when it's Rachel's turn. 4th grade recorder recital. The assignment was hot cross buns, which, if you've ever heard a classroom of 9-year-olds play it, you know is already a crime against humanity. Rachel got up there and essentially murdered hot cross buns in cold blood. Wrong notes, squeaks, the whole thing sounded like a goose being slowly deflated. And my family? Standing ovation. I am not exaggerating. Mom, Dad, both sets of grandparents, Aunt Kelly, Uncle Mark, 3 cousins, and even Grandma Marie, who needed a walker by then, packed into those tiny folding chairs like it was opening night on Broadway. Cameras out, actual bouquets of flowers, dinner reservations afterward at her favorite Italian place to celebrate Rachel's big night. I sat at that dinner twirling overcooked spaghetti, listening to everyone dissect her 3-note performance like she just headlined a world tour. Meanwhile, my solo, my science fair win, my straight A streak, footnotes, background static. It's funny how life works out sometimes. Those empty seats at my big moments became the blueprint for how I measured my own worth. Here's the bit that really messed me up. After a while, I stopped expecting them to show up. I began scheduling my own victories around their probable absence, pre-grieving the disappointment before it even happened. And that pattern, that constant training in where I ranked, is exactly why, years later, when I quietly built something worth millions, I didn't tell them a word. Until one Thanksgiving, when Rachel opened my laptop and saw a number that made hot cross buns look like the least dramatic performance our family had ever witnessed. Looking back, I can see how the stage was already set by the time we got to that Thanksgiving laptop incident, because the script for our family had been written years earlier when Rachel discovered that being sick was basically a cheat code for life. By around 7 or 8, the doctors had shifted their tone. Instead of late-night calls and dramatic pauses, we were hearing words like stable, manageable, normal life with some precautions. They told my parents she could go to school, play with other kids, eat regular food as long as they watched a few triggers. It was objectively good news. The crisis phase was over. Our house didn't get that memo. Do you know those family dynamics in which everyone says they want normal, but they are secretly addicted to the emergency? Yes, welcome to my life. Even when Rachel's charts looked fine, my parents still watched her like she was made of spun glass and a bad thought. Every cough was a, maybe we should call the specialist. Every yawn was, she didn't sleep, poor baby. Every slightly pale morning was, keep her home, we can't risk it. Here's the bit that really messed me up. Her health improved, but the behavior didn't. At first I thought it was just habit, trauma residue. But after a while it was like watching a play where everyone else had agreed to keep pretending the building was on fire, even though the alarms were off and the firefighters had gone home years ago. The examples were so small they almost looked reasonable. Rachel would say, "I have a headache," and instantly she was excused from loading the dishwasher. I'd be stacking plates alone while Mom whispered, "She's pushing herself too hard, sweetie. You understand." She'd mumble, "I'm too tired." On the night we had a group science project and suddenly the plan changed. I was going to her friend's house alone to represent you both, while she watched TV under a blanket and Dad brought her toast. There was the math test she didn't study for because she felt off. The morning of, she told Mom she was stressed, and the real kicker came when Mom actually called the school, spoke to the teacher, and somehow got her extra time and a makeup option. I was in the background with my own A- paper, the one nobody asked about, listening to my mother negotiate like Rachel was taking the bar exam, not pre-algebra. It's funny how life works out sometimes, because I basically got a front row seat to a master class in how power is created in a family. I remember one night in the hallway, Rachel was supposed to help clean up after dinner. Dad reminded her, and she paused. I watched her eyes do this tiny flicker, like she was scrolling through options. Then she sighed and said very softly, "I don't feel good." Instant transformation. Dad's shoulders dropped. His voice went gentle. "Okay, honey, go lie down, I'll finish." And guess who ended up scraping dried cheese off the casserole dish? I did. That was the moment I actually saw it click for her. "I don't feel good" wasn't just a sentence. It was a magic key. Say it, and adults rearranged themselves. After that, it became a pattern. Big test? She was too overwhelmed. Chores? My chest feels weird. Family event she didn't want to go to? I think I might be coming down with something. Every time, the same result. Rachel opt out, everyone else pivot. And by everyone else, I mostly mean me. While she learned the game, I became the infrastructure. If she skipped chores, I picked them up because someone had to. If she bailed on a group project, I was the reliable partner who stayed late and fixed the PowerPoint. If she didn't understand an assignment because she'd been tired, I was the built-in tutor going over it with her while our parents praised her for trying so hard. Honestly, the worst thing wasn't even the extra work. It was realizing I'd been quietly cast as the backup generator. Invisible, unless something failed, expected to hum along without complaint. Looking back, I can see how all of this trained both of us. Rachel learned that discomfort was optional if she framed it as illness. I learned that my comfort was optional, period. And when you grow up like that, is it really shocking that, years later, when real money entered the picture, my family treated my bank account like just another thing they could rearrange with a sad story and a phone call? But I'm getting ahead of myself. Because before we get to the $12 million and the laptop screen, you need to see how far that sickest superpower storyline went. Straight through high school, and into the part where my parents expected me to fund the lifestyle they'd trained Rachel to believe she deserved. So while my parents were busy scripting Rachel as the fragile main character and me as the background prop, I quietly started doing something that would end up changing everything. I closed my bedroom door, not in a stomping, "you don't understand me" teenage movie way. At first it was just self-defense, but outside that door I was either a health threat to Rachel or free childcare or the person who should understand because I was the strong one. Inside my room I was nothing special, which honestly felt like a promotion. Do you know those family dynamics in which every shared space belongs to one person's needs and moods? Yes, welcome to my life. The living room was Rachel's recovery zone. The kitchen was Rachel's special diet lab. The car was Rachel's transport bubble. My room was the only square of the house not orbiting her, as long as I kept it quiet and invisible. So I made it smaller on purpose. I pushed my bed against the wall, dragged an old bookcase from the basement, and created this cramped little cave where I could breathe. I'd finish my homework, close the door, and disappear into a world nobody else cared about enough to invade. Here's the bit that really messed me up. My parents called it withdrawing, like it was some worrying symptom, but they also clearly loved it because it meant one less child to manage. Sarah's so independent, they'd say, while I ate dinner alone on a tray and watched art history documentaries on a hand-me-down laptop. That's where the weird little obsessions started. I got hooked on these grainy BBC specials about Fabergé eggs and royal tiaras. I'd pause the screen and sketch the settings, zoom in on hallmarks, Google the names. I began learning the difference between old mine-cut and brilliant-cut diamonds before I learned how to drive. Guess who didn't notice? The people in the next room. It's funny how life works out sometimes. The same isolation that hurt like hell also meant no one was monitoring what I did with my brain. While Rachel had tutors and specialists, I had YouTube playlists about Victorian mourning jewelry and a spiral notebook full of badly drawn brooches. And then there was the lavender. Rachel was allergic to basically everything scented: candles, fabric softener, certain shampoos. The worst thing was how fast everyone jumped to enforce her rules. You can't use that, it might trigger Rachel. Change your soap, your sister's wheezing. One day Grandma Marie gave me this tiny lavender pillow spray from some farmer's market, and I hid it like contraband. I tried it one night, just one spritz on my pillow. No one died. No one even coughed. But the smell clung to my room, and Rachel hated it. "It makes my throat tight," she'd whine from the hallway. My mom wrinkled her nose and said it was too strong. So I kept using it. Accidentally, I'd created a force field. Lavender was now a banned product, which meant my room became a no-go zone for everyone who worshipped at the altar of Rachel's imaginary sensitivities. Looking back, I can see how that silly little spray turned 4 beige walls into something sacred. My sanctuary smelled wrong to them, which made it finally feel right to me. The only person allowed to breach the lavender barrier was Grandma Marie. She'd knock softly, step in like she was entering a church, and actually look at what I had taped to the walls. Old auction listings I'd printed, photos of Art Deco bracelets, sketches of lockets. "Do you know why that clasp is better?" she'd ask, pointing at a blurry screenshot. Then she'd explain how certain closures meant quality, how weight in your hand told you more than a brand name, how people throw away value every day because they don't recognize it. She talked about jewelry, but she was really talking about everything. "Money's like that too," she'd say, almost casually. "You don't chase it, you learn to see it. You let it sit, let it work quietly. The loud money is usually the dumb money." We'd go to estate sales together when Rachel had episodes, and my parents were too busy hovering. While they panicked about her oxygen levels, Grandma and I were in some stranger's house at 8 a.m., digging through tarnished boxes. She'd press a ring into my palm and whisper, "Feel the weight. Look at the craftsmanship. This was loved. That's where the value is." Looking back, I can see how those Saturdays and those nights behind a lavender-sealed door trained me for the life my family still thinks is some fluke. I learned to be self-contained, to research obsessively, to find value where other people saw junk. Years later, when I was quietly building a business around spotting misclassified pieces and turning them into serious money, my parents just thought I was fine and good with her little antique job. The real kicker came when that same private, invisible skill set turned into contracts with high-net-worth clients and eventually 8 figures in my accounts. But before we get to the part where a single bank notification ruins Thanksgiving, you need to see how that bedroom sanctuary turned into my first real escape route, getting out of that house altogether. Getting out of that house didn't start with a college brochure or some grand rebellious moment. It started with a script my parents kept handing me and insisting I perform. Do you know those family dynamics in which one kid is the delicate porcelain doll and the other is basically the household Roomba? Yes, welcome to my life. Rachel just needs more attention right now. That was the opener. Always said with this strained, saintly patience like they were doing disaster relief work instead of basic parenting. Then came my line, "You've always been so independent, Sarah." Followed by the closer, the one that still makes my stomach flip. "You understand, don't you? You're the strong one." At first I actually tried to live up to it. I'd nod and say, "Yeah, I get it," while my mom rushed off to manage Rachel's latest crisis, a sniffle, a C on a quiz, a friend not texting back fast enough. Looking back, I can see how surreal it was. I'd be standing there with my own stuff, like the time I came home shaking after a teacher screamed at me in front of the class, and my dad literally patted my shoulder and said, "You're tough, kiddo, you'll be fine. Your sister had a hard day. Let's not add to your mom's stress." Here's the bit that really messed me up. As an adult, I can tell you with 100% certainty, no, I did not understand. I was not some tiny Zen monk who had transcended the need for affection. I was confused and hurt, and constantly trying to earn the level of care Rachel got for simply existing, and occasionally breathing dramatically. I remember sitting on the stairs listening to my mom on the phone telling a friend, "Sarah's so mature, she never causes trouble," while I was literally biting my hand to stop myself from crying because I'd just found out they couldn't come to my choir performance. Again, anytime I cracked, the script snapped back into place. If I said, "It feels like you don't see me," my mom would sigh and say, "Don't be dramatic, Sarah. You know your sister is fragile." If I got frustrated that Rachel's B- earned a family dinner while my straight A's got a distracted thumbs up, my dad would call me selfish and remind me, "You're the lucky one. You're healthy. You don't need all that fuss." Neglect got rebranded as maturity. My ability to cope alone wasn't a red flag. It was their favorite family virtue. The less I needed, the better person I was. The more I swallowed, the more proud they were. Do you know how twisted it is to learn that health equals less love? That the reward for being okay is getting less help, less time, less anything? After a while, it sank in. I began to believe my feelings were just, extra, optional. Decorations other people had time for. The worst thing wasn't even the favoritism. It was the quiet lesson underneath it. If you need something, you're weak. If you speak up, you're a problem. So I stopped asking for rides, for money, for comfort. I did my own homework, made my own meals, signed my own permission slips. I learned to pre-solve everything before it could inconvenience anyone. It's funny how life works out sometimes. That same "you're fine on your own" conditioning that crushed me as a kid also wired me to operate like a one-woman survival unit as an adult. I researched scholarships alone, filled out my own FAFSA, hunted down part-time jobs, because guess who didn't need help with college since Rachel struggled more academically and deserved the support. Looking back, I can see how that script didn't just make me independent. It made other people feel entitled to what I built. If you spend your whole childhood being told you don't really need anything, people start to believe your resources exist for them. My time, my energy, my money, of course I'd share. I was the strong one, remember? So when those private, quietly hoarded skills eventually turned into real money, into that $12.4 million sitting neatly in my accounts, my family's reaction wasn't, "Wow, we misjudged you." It was, "Perfect. The strong one finally has enough for all of us." And that's exactly how we got to a Thanksgiving table, where my sister felt zero hesitation about grabbing my open laptop, scrolling through my emails, and announcing my net worth like it was a party game. Because in their minds, my boundaries never really existed. I was the independent one. I didn't need privacy either. What they said next, when the numbers on that screen finally registered, is the moment everything detonated. And the part I still replay in my head at 3 a.m., when those numbers flashed across my laptop at Thanksgiving, my family thought they were seeing the explosion. What they didn't know is that the fuse had been lit decades earlier in a little girl's brain that quietly decided, no one is ever going to catch me if I fall, so I'd better never fall. Looking back, I can see how early that belief moved in and unpacked its boxes. Do you know those family dynamics in which one kid gets bubble wrap and the other gets a pat on the head and a chore list? Yes, welcome to my life. Rachel was the emergency. I was the contingency plan. Every time I got sent away for being a germ risk, my nervous system got the same memo. You are on your own. The worst thing wasn't even the neglect. It was realizing that if I stumbled, nobody would notice until I hit the floor. So I built a life around never stumbling. At first, that looked like what people call being mature for your age. I call it being a child with a disaster preparedness committee in her head. I moved out the second it was even remotely possible. Tiny studio, 3 locks on the door, a fire extinguisher I actually read the instructions for. I chose a boring, stable path on purpose, entry-level data analyst at a mid-tier tech company, not some glamorous influencer nonsense. Health insurance, 401k, predictable paycheck, safety over sparkle. Here's the bit that really messed me up. My parents saw that and went, "See? She's fine." They had no idea I was walking around with a constant low-grade feeling that one wrong move would send me straight into the abyss. So I over-prepared. For everything. I had spreadsheets for my spreadsheets. I meal prepped like I was training for an apocalypse, and when I discovered personal finance blogs the way other people discover religion, it was over. I began treating money the way I used to treat Grandma Marie's jewelry books, obsessively. I'd finish my shift, go home, and fall asleep with investment PDFs open on my laptop. Index funds, dollar cost averaging, tax loss harvesting, if there was a nerdy term for it. I tried to understand it. My coworkers were going out for drinks. I was on Boglehead's forums, comparing expense ratios like it was a competitive sport. It started small. That first tech job paid decent money, especially for someone who still thought a 99-cent candle was a splurge. I lived way below my means. Roommates when I could afford not to. Used furniture. No car for years. I shoved 40, sometimes 50% of my income into retirement accounts and brokerage accounts. While Rachel was posting brunch photos, I was auto-investing into broad market index funds and buying tiny bits of my company's stock. It's funny how life works out sometimes. The boring index funds quietly doubled, then tripled over a decade. The company's stock I bought because it was discounted at work? Guess who was there when we got acquired by a bigger firm and those shares turned into a very not boring windfall? That wasn't a lottery ticket. It was 10 years of saying no to takeout and yes to my future. By the time I left to start my authentication business, I already had a solid 6-figure portfolio cushioning the risk. Then the business worked. Slowly at first, 1 client, then 3, then a gallery, then an auction house that actually listened to me. The real kicker came when a Hong Kong buyer I'd helped on a tiny deal recommended me to a private collector. That relationship alone eventually translated into contracts that pushed my net worth from "wow, that's impressive" to "oh, that's 8 figures." Methodical, not magic. Years of compounding, a couple of very good exits, and a business that quietly printed cash while I still bought my jeans on sale. Meanwhile, my family? Completely out of the loop. To them, I was just doing fine. Not struggling, but certainly not spectacular. I drove a sensible car, wore the same black blazer to every holiday, and said things like, "Oh, it's just work stuff." When they asked how I was, they assumed I was scraping by like everyone else, and I never corrected them. Do you know what's actually wild? Even without knowing the numbers, the entitlement was already warming up in the background. Little comments over the years. "When we're older, you'll help take care of us, right?" From my mom, half joking, half not. My dad would say, "Good thing Sarah's the responsible one, she'll bail us all out someday," and everyone would laugh like it was a cute family bit. Rachel would joke, "When your little antique hobby blows up, I'm sending you my student loans." Like my future money was already tagged with her name. Looking back, I can see how they'd quietly filed my future under family property before a single dollar even materialized. So when it did, when the business took off, when my investments compounded, when the sale of some equity nudged my net worth over $12 million, I did the only thing that felt safe. I told no one. For 3 years, I walked around with 8 figures in assets and a straight face, at family dinners, thinking that as long as I stayed quiet, I was protected. And I might have been. Until one bank notification popped up on my laptop, one curious sister decided my privacy was optional. and my carefully hidden safety net became the centerpiece of Thanksgiving dinner. At Thanksgiving, my sister discovered I had $12 million, and my family demanded I give it to her, because apparently surviving childhood as the healthy one comes with a price tag. The house smelled like every Thanksgiving you've ever seen in a commercial. Turkey, stuffing, that sugary canned cranberry sauce my mom swears is tradition, even though no one actually eats it. The table was crowded with plates and elbows, and the kind of small talk you make with people who know exactly how to hurt you but are currently asking about traffic. I was at the end of the table, pretending to care about my uncle's fantasy football team while one eye stayed on my laptop on the kitchen counter. I was monitoring that Hong Kong auction, remember? One client, one piece, one wire transfer that would bump my balance by another 6 figures. I told everyone I just had to check work stuff, and at first nobody cared. Then dessert came out, someone poured more wine, and I did the stupidest thing. I stepped away, left my laptop open on the counter, screen on, sound on. Do you know those family dynamics in which one person's privacy is treated like a suggestion, not a boundary? Yes, welcome to my life. A notification popped up. Big bank logo, New Balance. My sister Rachel wandered over, probably to mock my little antique job again. The real kicker came when she leaned in, read the number, and her brain actually processed all those zeros. She screamed, not like a cute surprised scream. Full-on horror movie shriek. MOMDAD. Come here. Look at this. The room froze. Chairs scraped back. My dad squinted at the screen, did that slow double take, and then my mom put her hand over her mouth like she'd just watched me run over a puppy. Is that 12 million? My aunt whispered. And then it was chaos, everyone talking at once. Shock accusations, conspiracy theories. Why didn't you tell us? Is this real? Are you in trouble? Are you doing something illegal? Then very quickly it shifted into something else. Do you know what we could do with that kind of money? Here's the bit that really messed me up. My parents didn't ask how I did it. They didn't say they were proud. They went straight into planning mode. Rachel deserves a chance to finally relax after everything she's been through, my mom said, like she was reading from a script she'd been rehearsing for 25 years. You could pay off our mortgage, my dad added. Help your sister start that wellness studio she's always dreamed about. It was framed as obvious, natural. My duty. You've always been so independent, Sarah. You don't even like fancy things. You don't need all that. Looking back, I can see how they'd decided my life was basically a holding account for Rachel's comfort. I was the backup plan with a pulse and a bank account. I tried to laugh it off at first. Guys, it's not like I have 12 million in cash under my bed. It's tied up in the business, investments, contracts. But they were already building castles in the air with my money. My mom started listing bills. My dad mentioned some medical debt we never told you about. Rachel, who has never worked a full-time job for more than 9 months, looked at me like she was picking out a car. Then came the climax. I don't know what snapped, but something finally did. I took a breath and said, as calmly as I could, I am not paying off everyone's debts. I'm not handing over millions. I built this alone. No one helped me. I've been sending you money for years, and you never asked if it was sustainable. I'm willing to help in small, specific ways, but I am not the family ATM. Silence. Then the backlash hit like a wave. Selfish. Ungrateful. You're hoarding money while your family struggles. My mom actually said, after everything we sacrificed for Rachel, you can't even give back? As if my entire existence had been a line item in Rachel's treatment plan. The worst thing was feeling that old guilt rise up, the one that used to send me to Grandma's house every time I sneezed near Rachel. But under it, for the first time, was something else. Clarity. I am allowed to keep what I earned. I am allowed to not be used. The aftermath wasn't dramatic in a movie way. No plate smashed, just distance. Short, tense texts. Have you thought any more about helping with the mortgage? Rachel's really stressed about her loans. After a while, I went low contact. I stopped the monthly transfers. Holidays became sorry I'm working, which, to be fair, was usually true. It's funny how life works out sometimes. The business that made them resent me also gave me the freedom to step back. I won't lie to you. I feel crushing guilt some days, and enormous relief on others. Like I finally chose myself after a lifetime of being the understudy to someone else's tragedy. So here's my question for you. Am I wrong for keeping most of that $12 million? Do I owe them more because my sister was sick when we were kids? If you were in my place, what would you have done? Tell me in the comments, because I really want to know how this lands outside my own messed up bubble. And if you've dealt with family entitlement or money drama, share your story too. If you made it this far, make sure you subscribe for more deep dive stories like